So what I thought I'd just do is I'll just go through Arijiju. I know we're a relatively new member to the long run, um, but it will all kind of make sense as I kind of go through it right now. Just a table of contents. We'll just go through a little bit of a background as to who Arijiju is. I'll briefly touch on the house, our conservation approach, and then tackling some of the four C's within the long run, some of the challenges and solutions that we've had. Next, yeah. Okay, so just so everyone understands where Arijiju is, so Arijiju is situated in what we call the Lewa Barana landscape. It's a 90,000 acre private conservancy up in northern Kenya. And initially started off as two separate conservancies. One was Barana and Lewa. And what happened was Barana and Lewa dropped their fences to create one contiguous landscape for the protection of black and white rhino. How did Arijiju become into existence? So the owner is a private individual who is half Nigerian, half English. His wife is from Norway, and they had been coming to Kenya for about 15, 20 years prior to investing in Barana. And they wanted to find a place that reminded them of his childhood, where he grew up in Africa. And he wanted to ensure that his family, who are based in London, felt connected to their heritage and also were there to embrace in protecting this landscape. So Arijiju has a pretty unique conservation model, and I think I'll touch on it shortly. But one of the things that was very important in the design of Arijiju was that the house was carved into the hillside and almost disappears into the landscape. And they camped at the actual site, or camped in this area for about 2 years before deciding where to build. And one of the reasons for that was they wanted to make sure that there was no light pollution. They wanted to figure out where the prevailing winds came from. And also just wanted to really make sure that the house was as unobtrusive as possible to the landscape. So with that being said, the grass roof aesthetic to blend the house was a very focal point within the design. And one of the kind of sustainability elements to the house, if you could call it that, is that the house is very dynamic in regulating its own temperature. So what that meant was that there was no need for any aircon units or heating appliances to kind of keep the house heated or cooled down through different times of the year. Let me just touch on the house. There we go. So just a little bit about the house. Not sure if anyone knows, but I'll just briefly touch on it. So the house is a 5 bedroom house. It's a private exclusive use home that when the family are not there, that they lease out to guests that want to come and stay in the conservancy. But just a few features on the house. So it's got a cinema, a home office, it's got a boot room. One thing that Arijiju prides itself on is being a wellness retreat, and that includes having a gym. We've got a spa, a hammam, which is like a Turkish bath, and then a yoga shala. In saying that, we've got two in-house therapists that are from the area, that are trained locally as well as internationally, and all of our products are made on site from our vegetable garden or from local botanicals in the area. One thing that we also try and emphasize is that there is an array of activities to do at Arijiju. So choosing from a tennis court, squash court, we've got a football and bulls pitch. But more importantly, we try and pride ourselves on a slightly slower pace safari, which focuses on kind of wellness, healthy eating, and experiencing Barana Conservancy through either game drives, walking, e-biking, or horse riding. Just touching on a few sustainability elements on the house. So in saying that, we do have a solar system that powers the house. So we've got one of the first of its kind in East Africa, which is a, a 960 kilowatt hour battery uh, solarized container. So it was the first of its kind in Kenya, which equates to about a megawatt of storage of power. And then we've got about 250 kilowatt hour peak of solar that charges up the batteries. So what that's allowed us to do is to have all the kind of nice luxuries of Arijiju, but enable us to use renewable energy to power all those nice things throughout the home. We also catch a huge amount of rainwater. So we've got 30 staff that live on site. All 30 of them have got accommodation on site, and that's primarily where we catch most of our rainwater from. So we've got about 480 solar panels, which has a very intricate French drain system, which runs through a series of pipes that end up in about 450,000 liters of rainwater storage. And that rainwater storage is generally used for vegetable gardens, irrigation on some of our landscaped areas, as well as washing vehicles and that type of thing. In terms of wastewater, we've got quite an extensive wastewater treatment plant. So it's called an MBBR plant, which stands for Moving Biobed Reactor Plant. And what that allows us to do is recycle all of our black and gray water. So all of the water that comes from our toilets, our showers, our kitchen, everything runs through a filtration plant. And by the time it comes through this filtration plant, it's extremely clean and can be reused for washing outside areas. It can be used for landscaping, washing vehicles. And what that's allowed us to do is reduce our water consumption as a whole by nearly 50%. Then there's a few other things that we do, which is all part of our recycling practices. The recycling practices involve collecting all of our soft plastics, hard plastics, all of our tins, glass. And what we do is collectively with Barana, we send them down to the recycling center on Barana. And I'm sure Eloise and some of the other Barana long run members will probably touch on this, but a lot of our glass bottles, from wine bottles to gin bottles, are recycled in building materials. We've got a glass crushing machine. So kind of everything is sent through to the headquarter where it's collectively managed and sorted out. I'll just touch on a few things on the approach. So a few people don't maybe know this about Barana, but Barana has a very interesting conservation model in that Arijiju is one of 5 other stakeholders inside the conservancy. And it's essentially run by 5 families, and all 5 families have pledged an underwriting to cover all the core conservation costs for Barana. So these financial underwritings get paid every year. And this covers everything from wildlife conservation through to kind of community initiatives. Anything that's generated above and beyond that is then plowed back into the conservancy. In saying that, Arijiju, in theory, is technically a non-for-profit. So every cent that's generated through guests coming and staying in the house goes into covering Arijiju's costs, as well as investing in the staff. And then from that, we invest everything else into other conservation projects. So, for example, if we would have, during the droughts that we had a couple of months ago, some of the communities really struggled to get access to water. So we needed funding to put in a pipeline to get some of the communities water. Those additional funds are plowed into those types of projects. A school that needs to be built, those funds are plowed back into that. So it's a very unique conservation model where I think looking through COVID times when there was no tourism, Barana could stand on its own 2 feet and there was still enough revenue to keep boots on the ground for the rangers. There was still community projects running and carrying on. We could cover core conservation running costs with all the families' underwritings. Let's move on to the next one. So maybe let's just touch on some of the four C's and some of our challenges that we have, and in the conservation area, this is kind of a few of our immediate challenges that we're facing. So obviously endangered wildlife species and protection throughout Borana. So Borana has one of the largest contiguous landscapes for black and white rhino in East Africa. So we're currently sitting on about 255 rhino. It's almost a 50-50 split. So challenges around how do we keep protecting the species. But on top of that, reticulated giraffe are critically endangered, grevy's zebras. We've got home to about 10% of the world's population on Borana. Some of the other challenges include security for wildlife and communities, transparency with tourism revenue, and then obviously sustainable practices in remote locations. So some of the solutions, Arijiju plays a part in a bigger picture of like-minded stakeholders that are involved in Borana. So I think Arijiju's annual underwriting combined with our conservation partners, this goes directly back into the conservancy. The other thing is ensuring long-term sustainable conservation models are set up around Laikipia. And these models include helping acquire land in certain places to ensure that they're not further developed or turned into farming lands, making sure that there's education set up for a lot of the communities outside, in teaching them why it's important to preserve and protect these areas. And a lot of the wildlife in Borana also does move outside of the conservancy. So these migration corridors as such need to be protected. Just in terms of I know Sirikoi just touched on it now, but one of the big problems that we have in Laikipia is we're losing a lot of vegetation to elephants. So Laikipia is one of the few places in Africa where wildlife numbers are increasing. So elephants in particular are really destructive towards trees, and we're losing a lot of trees. So just from last year, May, up to now, Arijiju just planted about 5,000 indigenous trees around the Arijiju area of the conservancy, and those all include your African wild olive, your Carissa edulis, Acacia xanthifolia, as well as a few other indigenous species. Another thing that I think that Borana as a whole that falls under Arijiju is that Borana has a transparent model where we showcase how every single dollar that's generated from tourism and donations is spent throughout the conservancy, which I think is very important in today's day and age. And then obviously there's all the sustainable practices that we do as a property around our black and grey water, recycling of rainwater, and so on and so forth. Community. So what are some of our challenges with community? So obviously there's the kind of obvious ones: employment and job creation, natural resources such as lack of water and food access, human-wildlife conflict, education, healthcare, overgrazed and degraded community areas. So a few solutions that we've addressed. So Arijiju employs about 89% of its staff from neighboring communities from Borana, and half of them are women. A few things that we've done just from Arijiju is we set up a permaculture project in the Arijiju community. So about 80% of the school kids don't have access to fresh produce in their meals daily. So we set up a permaculture project where we taught them how to farm so that the kids can get fresh produce in their lunches every day. Tackling some of the kind of human-wildlife conflict issues, so working with a lot of local conservation organizations such as Lion Landscapes, where we'd often have lions going into community areas, eating their cattle. We put funding into getting a collar on one lion in particular, and that way we could have give the community a heads up when there was a bad lion coming over to try and eat their cows. Yeah, we funded a school, so that's just a few of the kind of internal projects that we've done. Obviously, Arijiju as a whole contributes towards a bigger picture within Barana, which I think Eloise will touch on some of our overall collaborative um, projects that we work on. The other thing that we do is we do have a livestock to market program. So a lot of the areas outside of the community, outside of the conservancy areas, don't have access to good, clean grass. So we've got a livestock to market program where we bring on some of their cattle onto the conservancy. We help fatten them up and then help them sell them for more money. In terms of culture, just quickly on culture. So I think one of the challenges preserving local culture and traditions in an authentic manner. So one of the things that we've done is we try and encourage guests to go and visit our local Arijiju community, and we try and encourage them not to interfere or push any Western ideology onto them. Through those visits, there's a small beadwork center that we support. So obviously we buy some of their beadwork, which goes directly to the ladies. And then on top of supporting some of the local traditions and cultures, we've incorporated a few of the local traditions in a lot of Arijiju healing techniques, should I say, that we use in our spa. So two of our therapists work closely with Samburu healers and Maasai, and they've incorporated a lot of our products that we make all in-house. They use those from Samburu healing techniques. So Frida, who's one of our therapists, she went to Thailand to learn Thai reflexology. And in the Samburu culture, their culture is very similar to Thai reflexology and Thai massage. So she's incorporated a lot of traditional Thai or Samburu healing techniques in her practices. Commerce, quickly. So challenges, I believe long-term, we need to come up with bulletproof conservation models that are financially viable. Other challenges include high-end quality supply chain for different dietary requirements, high-end training schools for the hospitality industry, from food and beverage to wellness, I think is lacking. What are some of our solutions? So I think Barana's model of having like-minded conservation partners who front underwriting costs to cover core operating costs is a bulletproof model. And I think more and more people need to look at replicating similar things like this. High-end, quality supply chain. We definitely seeing a lot of dietary requirements and challenges within the supply chain in Kenya. For example, vegan products are very hard to come by in Kenya. And we pushed a particular supplier for a long time, and they started developing their own vegan butter, for example. And I think if more of us stand together and try and push, we can avoid imports on certain products and things like that. And then obviously training for us is a very big one. We feel there's a major lacking training facility in Kenya that's focusing on food training, beverage training, and wellness. So what we've done is we bring in a lot of international and external trainers from South Africa, the UK, America, all over the world to come and train the staff on an international level. And then the other thing that we do is we actually send a lot of our staff away. One example would be as Frida, our therapist, we sent her to Thailand for 4 months to go and learn Thai reflexology and Thai massage, giving our staff the experience and training overseas in a kind of international market, I think is very important. I do think there's a bigger element behind trying to do things more local if possible.